Hello, folks. Just before I guess we get started in a big way, I'm going to make sure everyone can hear me because I've been messing with my audio and I don't know if it's functioning correctly. Right. I think I'm being heard. This is good. All right. So today I want to talk about a few things. And I guess the first one is the Keffels swatting thing. And also just kind of swatting in general, because this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in society. And yeah, so oh, and I just see in the chat here, I see Gabiscus. Is that how I'd pronounce that? That is awesome that you're getting ready to go for law school. And I see a comment here. I am sometimes in Vancouver, so I'll try to sort of make an announcement the next time I'm going to be there. But yeah, absolutely. All right. So if you don't know the backstory on this, I'm going to try to do an explanation on this one. I'm going to give a little starter note, which is that if you came here hoping that I'm going to slag on Keffels, you have probably found the wrong channel, because that is not really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the swatting incident, which is really messed up, because this is something that is a bigger and bigger threat to a whole lot of us. I actually quite recently had to contact my local police and talk to them about the fact that I was getting some potential swatting risk. There were a bunch of people who were commenting on the Depp trial, who were all getting there were a few swattings. So I had to contact my local police and say, just so you know, this could be a thing. Please don't kick in my door and, shoot my dogs and possibly me, because that would not be a great thing here. I prefer not being shot at and so forth. So, and yeah. Thankfully, my local police were pretty good about that. They said that they have taken steps to prevent that. Now, and I see somebody asking about Micheladas here. I'm just finishing making mine just by adding a little bit of beer there. So, if you see me dying, this has some really nasty hot sauce in it. So we'll see how that goes. Ah, not dead. I could have probably used more of the hot sauce. All right, so I see somebody asking me, can I define swatting? And so swatting happens in a variety of ways, but it's basically when somebody reaches out to the police and makes a false report, or some sort of gives them false information somehow in order to provoke the police into showing up in sort of a full tactical raid. Which is why it's called swatting. I mean, usually in Canada, most of the sort of equivalent departments are sort of described as the tactical section. But I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. So that's really what swatting is about. It's a way people use, or way people try to harass, or in some ways potentially cause harm to somebody. People have died in swatting incidents. People have been killed because the police get a report that is typically, that typically suggests that there's going to be something urgent. That somebody is extremely dangerous, or there's, a, homicide in progress or something along those lines. And so this leads the police to show up and be potentially quite jumpy. And so, if you hear your door getting kicked in, somebody might reach for a weapon. They might reach for any sort of thing, or they might come out. And so this is a real risk. Now, Keppels, I don't know the full, details. I did reach out to her, and I was not able to make contact with Keppels. So I don't have the full details of what happened to her. I've got the reports she's made, and I've got some of the media coverage and so forth. So this is sort of the best I can figure out. But apparently somebody sent an email, supposedly like they were basically pretending to be Keffels when they sent this email. And they said that they had killed Keffels' mother, and also that they were planning that they had a firearm, and that they were planning to go to city council meetings um, and kill a bunch of other people. Specifically, they specifically said that they would go kill cisgender people because Keffels is a trans Twitch streamer. And from what I understand, there's been a substantial section of the internet who has been pissed off at Keffels for existing as a trans person, and also for some trans activism. Now, I don't know the full details on that, and that's really not what I'm here to sort of dig into. Some people have made various allegations that kind of seem like BS to me, but I mean, I that's not what this is about. So, and there are people who dislike Keffels, but that's again not what this is about, because nobody should be getting swatted. Period. And if you don't like somebody, that's not an excuse for that. So, yeah, and I know there's some people here who are going to be upset because Keffels is a trans streamer, and you probably got the wrong channel for that. I mean, I'm a supporter of the Pink Pistols. I'm a supporter of armed equality. Um, yeah. So if you're here hoping that I'm going to be, dunking on Keffels, this is not the right stream for you. But so yeah, because they got that report, the police went and they got a search warrant. And so that search warrant was then executed on Keffels' property. And when they executed that search warrant, they did so with what they would call patrol carbines. Of course, patrol carbines are what the police would call, if you had one, the police would call it an assault rifle. But yeah, they're basically AR-15s is what they showed up with. And so she apparently had a gun pointed in her face, and they seized all of her electronics. Now, there's been a lot of stuff going on. One thing I've heard people say that, listen, they've said, hey, nobody gets swatted in Canada. And that is BS. I don't know how to put it any other way, because swatting is a problem in Canada. And in fact, it's such a problem in Canada that there's plenty of people who get swatted by accident. And what I mean by that is that, a scenario that I see quite a bit, and this is one that affects veterans especially. So you may have a military veteran. They've served overseas. They've got some issues with PTSD. They've got some issue with depression. They've got some issues with these kinds of things, right? And so they're struggling, but they have a support network because they're taking reasonable steps to deal with this. And they're also veterans, so they may enjoy, for instance, going target shooting. So they they call one of their support people, a friend of theirs, somebody who maybe they served with, and they say, you know what, I'm having a real tough time. I'm having a difficult night. I just want to talk for a while. And they talk, until 2 a.m. And they work, the guy's feeling a little better. He's like, okay, thanks. Because he's having a rough moment and he needs some help in order to get through that moment. And so then he goes to bed, and his friend who he was talking to, the support person, is thinking, he's having a real tough time, and they want to do something more, right? They want to help out. And so where they go wrong is they call the police and they say, could you just drop by and see if he's okay? And the police hear, we need a wellness check. And you don't want to be on the receiving end of a wellness check. Wellness checks are actually fairly fairly unpleasant for most people. It's kind of weird that we take people who are depressed or having, difficulties, and then we send in angry, shouting people with guns, and we think that's going to help. Doesn't usually help. So, yeah, there's this. So what the police hear is military vet, owns guns, mental health, and they show up with body armor and rifles, and they kick down the door, and they they go in, they take all the person's guns, they often like pull the guy out of their house and prone them out on the lawn, so the guy's sitting there face down in the dirt, with his hands behind his back and a rifle pointed to the back of his head, while his neighbors watch this and wonder, oh, hey, is this guy having, what's going on with this guy? Is he a drug dealer or what? And they're pulling, all this guy's gun collection out, and as the neighbors watch, and this is something that happens to people by accident because their friend was a little concerned about them. So, yeah, swatting happens all, it is a problem, and it's a thing that happens, by accident, but it also can happen, of course, on purpose, which is what we typically call, a swatting incident. Of course, the Trudeau government is going to make it a lot easier because you're going to be able to go and make an ex parte application. You could just go into court, and your side of the story will be the only one that'll be heard, and not the other side's. And so you can make an ex parte application to have somebody swatted. He's going to actually create a method for swatting people. It's absolutely insane, but that's kind of its own rant. I did a video about that, and yeah, it's nuts. It's going to actually get people killed. But yes, I mean, practically speaking, a wellness check, I see somebody noting that it should be knocking on doors and peeking in windows to see if anyone is in need of assistance. Absolutely. But they often go in like somebody's armed and dangerous. The police get taught basically, to err on the side of caution. And one of the things I will note is that I've got a bit of a saying, which is that, the scary people aren't sort of, you don't need to worry nearly as much about a brave person as you do about a cowardly person. And part of the reason for that is that, a brave person might kill you if they have to, whereas a coward might kill you if they think they might have to. And that's the problem that we have with policing right now, which is that the police are being taught, they're being taught a form of cowardice. They're being taught that every scenario they walk into is super dangerous and super risky, and that they always need to be at, high alert. And somebody says, do I think Bill C-21 will be passed? Probably. They have the support for it right now. So I do think that is unfortunately likely. And it is probably, as I said, going to get some people killed. So, anyway, back to Keffels. So Keffels gets sort of dragged out of her house or her apartment or the like, with rifles pointed at her, and they seize all of her electronics, and they're holding them. Now, of course, seizing all of her electronics is a big deal when she's a Twitch streamer, because that's how she makes her money. That's how she talks to people. That's how she relates to the world. I've been at YouTube, I think it's a couple of years as of a few days ago. And, now I've sort of got a community. I like talking to you guys. I like being here and chatting with you guys, because it's just, it's kind of a fun experience on all of that. So that is, that's a big thing. Now, so as I said, some people were saying, oh, you don't get swatted in Canada. That's not a thing. So that must mean that Keffels was up to something bad. It doesn't mean that at all. I mean, what happened is that the police got this email, and then they responded to it in a sort of a fast, they went and got a warrant, so they had some time to investigate it. But the other thing you need to, and I see something in the comments, I'm going to address this later because this is wrong. This is wrong. But I'm going to address this a little later. And I don't mean to call you out here, but I've seen a lot of people making this allegation, and it's not correct. So, where was I? Yeah, this does happen, and what will have happened is that the police will have gotten this email. And you have to remember that the average police officer is not super technically minded. They don't have like this big pool of tech experts. So when you watch something like CSI or whatever, the instant they get some sort of electronic information, they're just able to send it to their dedicated team of, scientific badasses and solve the problem, and make a real investigation. Well, that's not actually how things work. If you're watching NCIS, they don't have an Abby there. They maybe have somebody who they can call on 6 weeks notice to get some information. So they wouldn't have been able to actually, or they wouldn't have put in the effort. I shouldn't say they wouldn't have been able to, because they absolutely would have been able to. They just don't have the resources, and they don't actually care enough to go and investigate this email. And that's something that they really need to be doing more of, because the police need to be aware that swatting is a thing. And so when they get these, these lurid reports, what they need to do is stop going, you know what? Now is the time to grab the rifles and the body armor. And, you got to remember, though, grabbing the rifles and the body armor and rolling out all on the tactical, deployment, that shit's fun. They like that. And that also helps justify their budget, because, when they're asking for a budget where they say, listen, we need, an armored vehicle and we need all of this tactical gear. Well, you can't justify that budget unless you use it, right? You can't say, well, we needed this money for this $1 million armored vehicle that we just never deploy. So there's this real incentive to get those things moving and get them out and about. So that's kind of its own other thing on that aspect. But so they wouldn't have actually investigated to look and see is this just an email with a forged from address? Do the headers actually match up with what it says? Maybe we should do some forensic analysis on this. Similarly, when they get text messages that say, something like this, maybe be a little bit skeptical of this report, that comes in by text message. They really need to actually pay a little bit more attention. And I think the police need some actual education into swatting calls and what a swatting call typically looks like and how to differentiate it from a real call. Of course, the police are going to say, hey, listen, we always have to treat these as super serious because somebody could die. If we get this call that somebody's about to go on a spree and we don't take it seriously, then somebody could die. But somebody could die if you roll out with the tactical team. You could kill somebody who was a complete innocent. And there's actually a really good parallel here, and it's going to be a bit of a weird parallel. I want you to, sort of bear with me here. This is going to be a bit of a weird parallel. The parallel is ATM machines, ATMs, because ATM machine is a little redundant. So everybody's familiar with those little ATMs that they put in convenience stores. Yes. Somebody, let me know in the chat if you are not familiar with these things. But I mean, one of the issues that they have is, how do you put a machine out in a convenience store where you probably don't even trust the convenience store owner, right? Because the convenience store owner, who knows who this guy is, right? He could be honest, or, could be sketchy too. And you need to pack this thing full of money, thousands of dollars, into this ATM because people need to be able to come by and, put their card in and get cash out. That's the whole idea of these little ATMs. And then they just charge you a little fee for it. So they have a problem with this, which is, how do you keep people from breaking into these things? How do you keep people from stealing them? Because, I mean, you leave $1,000 in a machine, in a place where you're just not able to watch it. Those things go missing. Like, those things would go missing, those things would get broken into, those things would, all sorts of things, So this is the big problem they have. And the solution to this is actually really simple. It's, you could try to build this thing to be like a tank. You could try to build it with 6 inches of armor plating on each side. But the problem is that that's not going to work, because you just steal the ATM, the whole thing, and then you just take however long it takes to, cut into it. And if there's, $5,000 in this machine, then that's worth a lot of effort, right? Somebody's going to sit there with an angle grinder and spend, they're going to spend the time on it. So what they do instead is they actually put in a bunch of anti-tamper. Sorry, 1 second. Ugh. So they put in a bunch of anti-tamper systems, things to detect if you tilt the machine, or if you hit it with something, or if you're drilling or cutting or any of that stuff. And I mean, those anti-tamper mechanisms, of course, aren't going to be perfect. But if they're not perfect, then, you still don't know where the anti-tamper mechanisms are. And they tend to be pretty good. They tend to be more or less, able to defeat your average burglar, because your average burglar is not the most clever person on the planet. So what they do is they rig all of those anti-tamper mechanisms to a die pack. And that die pack is designed to ruin the money. So, you're thinking, that's thousands of dollars that you're wrecking. And yeah, that's the whole point. They're willing to lose those thousands of dollars in order to deny the benefit to the thief. This has been really effective. It means that for most thieves, an ATM is not a good target, because they can drag the whole ATM out of the store with, a front end loader or something like that. And then they drill into it and they get a bunch of money they can't spend. So that stops people from doing it, is that they've been denied this benefit. The problem with swatters is that the swatters get all the benefit right now, because, when they make these swatting complaint, or, these false complaints, then, and thank you for the YouTube membership, much appreciated. But when people make these false complaints, the one thing Keffels kind of maybe did wrong is posting publicly about it, because, whoever it was who targeted her is probably going to be sitting there going, isn't this great that they went in? She was terrified. They took all of her stuff. Yeah, I'm super happy about that. And that said, Keffels has been able to raise a fair bit of money to help her get going again, and for legal expenses. I know she's been criticized for the amount of money she's raised, but I'm pretty sure she's going to be spending that on lawyers. And I'll talk about that a bit later as well. So we need a better system for the police to recognize these things and to deny the benefit to the swatter, to investigate it and go, maybe this is a situation where we don't need to roll out in full tactical. Maybe we can send a guy to investigate, and then tactical on standby, in case that's necessary. But this complaint, you got to think, who sends an email saying, I've killed my mother and I've got an illegal gun and I'm going to go on this spree? Like, maybe roll out tactical and keep them like a block away so that they're ready to deploy if you need to, and just have somebody knock on the door and say, hey, what's up? We got this report. And they can make that investigation. You send a couple of, a couple of officers to just ask that question. So yeah, that would be a much better system. Similarly, when they get things like text messages and emails, they should probably have a team. And if you're talking about the police, they have the potential to call on somebody from anywhere in the country to do this kind of emergency tech support. So it would not be hard, for instance, for the RCMP to set up a swatting check station of with and staff it with some people with technical backgrounds, some actual tech people, and not people who necessarily had to come up through the beat cop system to become police officers, civilian members who are just able to do that. And I mean, they applied for a warrant here to investigate, but really maybe they should have started with a warrant to get the information from like the ISP and to say, hey, did this email actually come from Keffels, or did it come from some other random person? And, because if they have the time to apply for a warrant, because it sounds like they did, um, then maybe they should be applying for a warrant to do some other investigation first. So, yeah. Now, I guess the next one here that I'll talk about is the one I mentioned before, where people are saying, listen, in a swatting incident, they don't take your electronic devices. So therefore, there must be something else going on here, something nefarious. And in fact, people have been suggesting that this would be, CP. I'll just use the initialism here because YouTube will get upset, but, bad pictures. So, and somebody says, seems odd they got a warrant based on just an email. I will tell you, they'll hand out a warrant based on, like writing on a napkin, writing on a bar napkin. If they tell the JP, hey, we think that there's going to be a mass murder, they'll hand out a warrant based on absolutely nothing. So yeah, it doesn't seem surprising to me that they would get a warrant based on the email. Now, in terms of why they would take all of the electronics if it's just this threat of homicide, well, I'm going to say this one really slow because some of the people who are floating this seem to be being real resistant to catching a clue on this one. And I mean, there's some people who should really know better, who are just floating these theories based on, we don't know, but maybe. Okay, the real slow talking version. I'm sorry, I don't have a hand puppet, so some of the people out there advancing this may not be able to follow along. But the reason why they would have taken all of her electronics is because of it being an e-mail, electronic mail. They're going to be looking through the electronics in order to see if she sent the email. That's the reason. Now, keep in mind, I think it's the London Police Service has been inundated now with complaints. There have been news stories about this. There have been people calling them. They have had to shut down comments on their Twitter feeds. They have had to do all sorts of things. So the London police has every incentive to try to burn Keffels to the ground. They're going to be trying to do that. If they have anything that they can do to go after Keffels, I can guarantee you that they will, because they very much want to clear their name here. They very, very badly would love to say that Keffels is the bad person here. That Keffels is the villain, because otherwise it's them, right? Otherwise the police are going to say that one. So, yeah, that's sort of what's going on there. Now, some people have said, hey, I think, we're concerned that Keffels might have CP. I actually am fairly confident that Keffels is least likely to have CP of like lots of people out there, because Keffels just had all of her electronics seized and the police will have been digging through them in order to find anything they can in order to burn Keffels to the ground, as I said. So you don't think that that was one of the first things they looked for when they would have pulled the data off and ran this through in NCASE and the other forensic things? If there was a single picture, I bet we would have been hearing the London police making that call. They wouldn't have been releasing her electronics, because I understand she's got them all back now, without any charges. So I consider that particular allegation to not only be unfounded, but in fact as close to disproven as we can get at this point. There is the possibility that they might be under such pressure to return the electronics that they just imaged the electronics and then returned the originals and kept an image in order to do analysis. That is possible. They might be still digging through all of that stuff, but more likely they went and they had a look and didn't find anything they could charge Keffels with. Keep in mind, and you might say, oh, well, they're not going to be doing that because they've identified her as the victim. Well, no, they started out having identified her as the likely perpetrator. And I had a previous video where I noted that when I called the police because somebody sent an email threatening to cause me very serious harm, they basically threatened to burn my eyes out with acids, which, is not a thing I enjoy. Please don't do that. But yes, when I got an email threatening me with that, they opened an investigation as to whether I committed a crime. So the police tend to be real happy if they could just close their file with, we charge somebody. And yeah, so don't hold your breath on that one. Lots of people saying they don't like Keffels. And you know what? I tried watching her stuff. It's not my cup of tea. I just, it was not something that I terribly enjoyed, but whatever. I haven't dug into all the politics stuff. But I certainly support Keffels' right to, exist as a person. And the other thing I'll note is that there are some people noting that Keffels at one point made a comment on Twitter saying to somebody else, I hope you get swatted. And they're saying, oh, well, that justifies it all. Well, I mean, I have made comments along the lines of, well, I really hope that person gets hit by a bus. But that does not mean, chat, that you are entitled to go rent a bus and come find me. Please do not do that. People say stupid things that they don't mean, because that is just how people talk. Sometimes people are jerks to each other. Sometimes. So I don't put a whole lot of weight in that one. So, I don't like the comment. I certainly don't like the, and I don't know I've heard that there might be some circumstances and so forth around it. I don't like the comment around it. I don't think anybody should be encouraging swatting in any fashion. But people say things like that. I've said, hey, I think, that this politician should be eaten by rabid weasels. But, don't send any weasels to my house, please. Yeah. I mean, the larger allegation was just that there was a threat to go kill a bunch of people. That's what I've heard there. I don't know if there's any other allegation. I haven't seen that there, but it's so, the other thing I'll talk about here is I've seen some people suggesting that there is no criminal offense of, for swatting in Canada. And that is not entirely correct. There's not a specific, sort of swatting provision. There's no section that is like titled swatting, but there is a section called public mischief, and public mischief is, and I'll just, give me 1 second. I'm just bringing up the criminal code here. It's just going to take me a half second. I just want to get this accurate when I read you the definition of it, because, Sorry, folks. Just I should have had this prepped and ready to go, but I didn't because I am not always on my A game. So, public mischief. I'll just read you the offense here. Everyone commits public mischief who, with intent to mislead, causes a peace officer to enter on or continue an investigation by A, making a false statement that accuses some other person of having committed an offense. And quite frankly, I would, if I was a judge, um, I would interpret this as including specifically a situation where somebody is pretending to be someone else. And I see somebody saying that mischief is a plea bargain charge. Mischief is a separate offense than public mischief, but also mischief goes all the way up to life in prison. So be aware of that as well. So it can be a plea bargain charge, but it can also be really serious. So that's subprovision A, or doing anything intended to cause some other person to be suspected of having committed an offense that the other person has not committed, or to divert suspicion from himself. Or C, reporting that an offense has been committed when it has not been committed. Or D, reporting or in any other way making it known or causing it to be made known that he or some other person has died when he or that other person has not died. So all of those things would apply to this case. So it's very much the case, I think, that, we've got a potential for a public mischief here. And now here's the problem. Public mischief has as its penalties, everyone who commits public mischief, A, is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or B, is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. So the maximum penalty is 5 years, but this is, and I'm not normally a person who says we could use more laws, right? That's not normally my brand. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. Most of the new laws that they put in kind of are unnecessary, but this one is a tough one to, as a tough situation. It's kind of a novel crime. It's a new offense, like a new thing that didn't happen 20 years ago. So this is a situation where I think that we could actually, and somebody was saying, is this a misdemeanor or a felony? Canada doesn't really have misdemeanors or felonies. We've got indictable offenses or summary conviction offenses. Public mischief is a hybrid offense, so the Crown can proceed by indictment, which is sort of the felony equivalent of a 5-year with a 5-year maximum, or they can proceed by summary conviction, which is the less serious version. Now, I think that what they probably should do here is set up a separate offense. And the offense I would list this as is public mischief endangering life. If for ordinary mischief, there's the crime of mischief endangering life, which takes the penalty all the way up to the potential of life in prison. I don't know that life in prison is necessarily, well, I would actually say that if you make a public mischief and somebody actually dies as a result of it, then there's the potential for murder. There's the potential for all sorts of things. But, yeah, I think that this is actually one of the few places that I think that we could actually do with a real crime here. Public mischief, causing bodily harm, public mischief endangering life, public mischief causing death. That's a potential sort of set of offenses here. And just as a brief divergence, somebody's asking, how is Potter doing? He's not yet running around. He is still on somewhat limited activity. He goes for walks. He is he's having a rough time in that sense. He's having a he wishes he could run. He wishes he could run around a little bit more. But he's still on his healing process. So that is where things sit there. Do I have a video out on the RCMP use of malware? Not yet. Soon. Can you still apprentice as an attorney in Canada? You need to go to law school, I believe, everywhere. And somebody was asking, what mischief gets you life? Mischief endangering life. Because mischief is a really broad offense. It's, pretty much any damaging property is mischief. So, for instance, you could be thinking of mischief in the sense of like keying your ex's car is a mischief. But a mischief could also be, for instance, removing a section of railway track that a passenger train, that causes a passenger train to derail. And, that could actually kill people. So that's why mischief goes all the way up to life in prison, is because some mischiefs are super freaking serious. And yeah. And I see Abyssoft, 60,000 subscribers, I understand, on his way to 100,000. So check out the channel. Guy in the USA got 20 years for calling in a swatting that resulted in death. Yep, absolutely. And I see somebody noting TPLOs take at least 3-4 months to recover from. Yes, it's just a little. He's at the point where he feels like he can do more than he can do, and that's kind of sad, And sometimes he sits there and he's sometimes he's kind of pouty, and I feel bad for him there. So I just wish we could take him for a run right now there. And one super chat that I missed here, but I saved it for later. Did Mrs. R get her necklace? She did. This is for that or the magic earrings. Well, thank you. And to support her husband. Well, thank you very much. Yes, she did get the necklace. I'm going to see if I can get a picture of that to post online, just because there was a lot of people wondering about that one and so forth. So, yeah, they that. So, so there is a crime for this, but it's not really ideal. And I see people noting, in terms of the spyware, now you can't even buy a phone with a removable battery for a reason. Yeah, if you want to actually prevent your phone from being tracked, you might need to invest in something like a little Faraday bag. And thank you for the super chat for doggy treats there. And there's a question about carry my special certificate or condition certificate when I get my PAL in the mail. If it says you do, then yes, I'm still going to have to check that. And Sky as a neighborhood is asking, are you still sleeping on the floor? Not as much. Sometimes. Potter has gotten used to sort of sleeping on his own a little bit, which is also kind of sad because it's nice. Like it was nice when he was there with us, right? I prefer that. But sometimes he's having a bad night and I try to crash next to him. So, and I see somebody saying I could take Potter on a wagon ride. That's actually a really good idea. I'm going to have to try that. So, and Christine Hill, thank you for the super sticker. The next thing I'm going to talk about with the whole Keffels swatting thing is the misgendering issue, because a lot of commentary on that. And of course, people have all sorts of opinions on this, but regardless of what your opinions are, there's also what the law says. And from what I understand, Keffels officially changed her name, legally speaking, some time ago, like a decade ago. I don't know for certain. I haven't seen any of the legal documentation, but I've got no reason to doubt her on this one. But for some reason, she was booked in under her dead name. The previous name she hasn't used in, a decade. And this is contrary to police training. This is contrary to, police policy. So there's going to be some issues on that because Ontario's got a human rights code, and that human rights code says that you can't discriminate based on people on a protected ground, which includes all sorts of things, specifically including gender identity and gender expression, as well as sexual orientation. So, and this is not my area of law, and I'm not an Ontario lawyer, but Keffels may well have a claim against the police based on this. I also think Keffels, yes, and I see people noting that Keffels is Carla Sorrenti. I'm terrible with names, but yes, I'm just using her streaming name there just because it's easier. That's sort of, what I know on that one. So, this is just the police kind of being unnecessarily a dick. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of the police being unnecessarily hostile to people. In fact, the police can actually be subject to discipline at times if they do things like if the police are just, if the police just, swear at people and that kind of thing. And I see somebody saying, is it possible the wrong name was given to the officers? I mean, the police would have to actually confirm her name in their system when they're doing the booking. So yeah, they would know better. And the other thing is that if they thought that Keffels was under the old name, like if they thought that was actually her name, they would usually lay a charge of obstruction of justice. For that's the charge that that the officers usually will lay if they think you're giving them a false name, which they didn't. They released Keffels without any charges. So that suggests they knew exactly what her name was. It sounds like they were just choosing not to use it in order to sort of harass and intimidate. And yeah, so, I mean, because they would have definitely had to confirm all of these details, right? That's part of the booking process is you got to know who you're booking and what their legal, name is. So yeah, but they also get training because there's plenty of trans individuals who have not yet changed their name, but in terms of legally speaking, but go by a different name. And so the training is that out of respect for people, you use the name they prefer if that's sort of the issue there. So even if their systems, because I see somebody saying, did she update her name in all of the in all of the government systems? Even if that's the case, they still would have had a responsibility not to do that. So, and I see not giving any official legal advice. That's always the case. Talk to a local lawyer if you need advice. Yes. But yeah, this was stupid on the part of the police. There was really no reason to do it. And all it does is potentially opens them up to liability. As I said, Keffels has managed to raise a bit of a war chest for litigation. And I wish her all the best in the litigation, because this might actually be what puts a dent in swatting, is if you get some people who actually are able to take the fight back to the police and make it cost the police some money when they screw this kind of thing up, then that might change things. So yeah, that's sort of that aspect there. So there'll be ramifications for the London police, less than you might think, because later on we're going to be doing a segment that I'm just experimenting with, just as a new trial thing, but it's the still a cop versus not a cop. And I mean, that'll be a great segue when we get there, but there might be less consequences than you think. So yeah. And so I don't know what's going to shake out on this. I mean, right now information is still a little bit sparse. We don't know the full details. I mean, there may be more information that comes out later that, could completely change the game. But for right now, a lot of the stuff people are saying about this case, it just doesn't have any basis in reality. I'm kind of disappointed in some of the figures I see who are suggesting things out there. And the other thing is that let's say, let's consider a hypothetical scenario here, because let's consider a hypothetical scenario that they find all sorts of criminal stuff on Keffels' hard drive. And I'm not saying that they will, because I actually think that we've probably excluded that likelihood at this point. But let's say that they do somehow. Well, at this point, they might actually run into an issue of whether or not that evidence would be excluded in a court case. So in theory, if the police sort of get one of these weak, half-ass swatting attempts, because I mean, this looks like a pretty, it's this weird email there. It might actually be that if they did find bad things on somebody's computer in that scenario, that person might get away with it because the police didn't do their end of things in terms of a proper investigation. So that is also a possibility that should be frustrating there. And somebody says, "Are you going to touch on your conversation with the quartering?" This is the extent of the conversation. The quartering put out something saying, "I don't know Canadian law. I would like to know more about this." And I did not know specifically that the quartering and Keffels had beef because I'm coming at this late. But I posted something going, "Hey, I'm a Canadian lawyer. I can clarify this." And I haven't spoken to the quartering. Quartering did not sort of respond or reach out. But had Jeffrey at the quartering reached out, I probably would have said that some of the things that he put in the video that he made later that day were not good. And I mean, this isn't like a diss video or a dragging video or anything like that. It's just he doesn't know the Canadian experience of what swatting in Canada looks like and what the police do when they get this kind of report. So he's making theories based on not getting the full details. And when you do that, those theories might be bad. I've said this before, you can have any opinion you want, but if that opinion is based on bad information or no information, then you're running the risk that you're going to, say something that ultimately isn't very useful. So I'm probably going to get a whole lot of angry shit over this later, but it is what it is. So so I see in Mississippi, police swatted the wrong half of a duplex house and a cop was killed in self-defense. Yep, and that is a potential situation. Self-defense gets to be a little tricky, and you got to check your jurisdiction because some jurisdictions, for instance, forbid any sort of self-defense against police. It's not the case in Canada, but some jurisdictions do set that up where, if a police officer is acting lawfully, then you have no self-defense case. But, you can have situations for self-defense where both sides, because of mistaken information, can be acting in self-defense. An example that I could give for this is like, let's say you've got two hunters in the woods. And unbeknownst to either of them, they're both innocents. These hunters are both they're just out there to, to have a hunt. And some third party, some malicious third actor is on a hill with a rifle and takes a shot at one of the hunters over the head of the second hunter, but and so that hunter is missed, but he has that near miss. He detects that he's been shot at, and he wrongfully assumes that he's being shot at by the first hunter, who's also an innocent. So in that case, you can get this situation where the second hunter, acting in self-defense, reasonably believes the first hunter took a shot at him and shoots back at the first hunter, who then now reasonably believes he's being wrongfully shot at, and they're engaging in, a fight there. And they can both be lawfully acting in self-defense. It's a bit of a fanciful example, but it illustrates the situation where bad information can sometimes create a self-defense scenario. So, yeah. And I mean, this doesn't come up a lot in practice, but yeah. So, and I see somebody saying, what would a good way be of getting a system to look at, these reports where we don't slow down necessary response times? I mean, the first thing here is that this was a situation where the police felt that they had enough time to go and apply for a warrant. There's actually processes that let them skip that step entirely if they feel that it's, an emergency right now, but they didn't do that. So the fact that they thought that they had enough time to apply for a warrant also suggests that they thought that they maybe had enough time that they could check this. I actually think that the one thing that they should do is probably set up a centralized, like across Canada, let all police forces, because, the RCMP and Edmonton Police and Toronto Police are all different police forces, but let them all share this just for like this sort of like a technical squad of emergency, like we need some, some eyes on this so that, I, as beat cop dispatcher, don't know if this is a good email, like this is something to respond at. And then that could be sent to them to get them to do an emergency right away, right now, look at it and go, okay, yeah, this looks real. Or, guys, you got to be aware this is using a forged header. And, there's something sketchy about this. There is something, unusual. And maybe this is something that we should spend more time on before we go and roll out the tactical team. As I mentioned, it also might be a good idea when it's a potential swatting call that you roll out tactical, but you just don't kick in the door right away. You just park them out front and then send somebody up to the door to knock. And then if it turns out you need tactical, you can deploy tactical. And I know that is, not the ideal sort of deployment, but it's less likely to get people killed innocently. So, yeah. Somebody saying when the RCMP got reports of a fellow in a police uniform on a shooting spree in Nova Scotia, they didn't believe the reports. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, they were out looking for the guy for hours. They just weren't telling anybody that there was this guy on this spree. So, yep. And somebody saying quartering is friends with Ricada. I'm not trying to drag the quartering here, and I'm not trying to drag Nick at all either. I'm just noting that sometimes stuff happens. I mean, Canadian law is weird, and the Canadian legal experience is weird. So, yep. So, yep. And I see somebody saying, did you say in a previous video that you had an appendectomy? I did. How did it go? Pretty good. It hasn't grown back. So, aces. Didn't die. So, also aces. And nothing is wrong with that. I'm feeling great. So, Jeremy got swatted harsh, wife in handcuffs and everything. And that's one thing I will give the quartering tremendous props for on this one, which is that he did take a position saying, listen, doesn't matter who you are or what's going on there, that, even if you disagree with somebody, that swatting is gross and it shouldn't happen. And so I give him points for that, because there's a lot of people out there who were saying, there were people who were cheerleading the swatting. They were like happy about this. And I'm going, that's gross. Quartering didn't do that. I give him props for that. I mean, he got a couple of things wrong about Canadian law, but an American getting a couple of things wrong about Canadian law is still batting pretty good. Could swatting be considered a hate crime in some instances? That I'd have to look up, because I don't know. I suspect so. But I mean, this is getting into a difficult. It's very difficult at times to prove. So just talking about hate crime legislation and so forth, it can be very difficult to establish that somebody was acting in it as a hate crime, because usually there's more people. Usually there's a lot of reasons to dislike somebody. And, for any person out there, there's tons of reasons to dislike somebody. And some of those reasons might just be straight up, you're mentally ill. And, so it can be very difficult to prove that was the actual, reason for it. So there have been some controversial cases here in Canada where, for instance, that somebody yelled racial slurs at another person and then attacked them, and they still didn't go with it as a hate crime, because it was like, well, this person was also mentally ill, so they might just be crazy. Like, they might just be acting out of that mental illness rather than actual animus towards, whatever group. So, yeah. Somebody was asking, does your home insurance cover you for swatting? I don't actually know. I might actually want to check on, check on that. So somebody said, I had a policeman bang on my door frame. I said, I'm not coming out, and I did not call for police. This was not a swatting, but a policeman with no good sense. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is really concerning overall is that, I mean, for a lot of people, if you're not involved in criminal activity, the police may actually be a bigger threat to you at any given day than they are a benefit to you, because most of the people who end up as victims of of homicides and so forth, and this is especially true for men who end up as victims of homicides, are involved in criminal activity, and they're getting, so you kind of taken a step into that world, if that makes sense. um, so um, it can be a difficult scenario to deal with there. So um, it can be really yeah. And I see there's a little bit of news here. I see Keffels just posted that she spoke with the London police chief and she is no longer under investigation. Great. So that ends that file. Hopefully she should be able to, and I understand she's got counsel, which is fantastic. I I wish her all the best in pursuing all of this, but hopefully that means that they will not only return her electronics, but also destroy any copies of data and so forth. And somebody says, wouldn't swatting be equivalent to making a false report, which is illegal, isn't it? Yes, I covered that. It would be the offense of public mischief. All right. And hey, we got Scott Cardinal in the chat here. So, hey, Scott, how are you doing? It's yeah, it's a, yeah, and I see people saying she should still sue. I think that she's planning to. I also know that she's planning on using some of that money to move because her address having been leaked. Yeah, I hope she's also getting. I hope she's also getting some advice on how to minimize your footprint as to where you are, to make it harder to track you. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I know now that I didn't know when I moved to where I am. And yeah. So the next question here is, when I see any particular subject tonight, there's a few headlines I want to cover. This Keffels thing is one of them, and swatting is one of them. I also want to do the cop or not a cop, or, still a cop versus not a cop. And there's a few other things I sort of want to cover, but yeah. So, and I just need to, if I'm going to set up polls later, I need to switch back into my primary account here. All right. So I'm just sort of, somebody says, is public mischief like disturbing the peace? No, it's like making a false police complaint, or faking your own death actually is public mischief, believe it or not. So, and I see somebody saying she must move. She must be able to record at a moment's notice. Yeah, there's some situations where you just need to be able to, there's ways to sort of hide your footprint to make it harder for people to track you down. Yeah. And I see this feels like a massive loophole. If the cops can violate anyone's privacy if they receive an anonymous threat, what's stopping the police from making their own anonymous report to search anyone? There are suggestions that this has happened in the past. Police would be subject to discipline for that, but there's suggestions it's happened in the past. So, yeah. All right. And I see, I can't see who's sort of giving the gift memberships, but it looks like it's Lindsay Metcalf. So thank you very much. I see somebody saying thank you for, the membership. The membership is just kind of a support option. I don't have a whole lot of membership benefits, but I'm going to need to make some better emojis and stuff for that and so forth. Somebody asking, did I watch the Ben and Camille interview earlier? I have not yet. So have we heard anything more about the gunsmith in Ontario who was killed in a raid? We haven't yet. And yeah, that's a concern. So share how to do it, Runkle. How do we erase or modify our footprint? This varies a bit by province to province, and this is probably something I would have to make a video about. But yeah, that'll be something for later. I see make an emoji of Potter. That's actually a really good idea. So yeah. The next question on this is, how do they track down the person who did the swatting? And that's a problem, because a lot of the stuff that happens online, if somebody is if somebody is really good at covering their tracks online, they can be very, very hard to find. When you're talking about, like, for instance, the guy who was running the Silk Road, the stuff that they had to do to track him down was extensive. And at the end of the day, they basically only tracked him down because of a mistake he made like 6 years earlier that allowed them to connect it to that person. So, yes, that so we don't know if they will ever actually be able to track this person down. I'm hoping that this person was not very sophisticated and did something like sent this from, you know, from their own cell phone while also standing, in a security camera or something along those lines. So, yeah, that would be. I hope they get the person. I really do. I think that would be fantastic, but we 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 don't know at this stage, and I wouldn't put too much hope in it, unfortunately. As I said, the police tend to be really bad at tech crimes, really, really bad. So there's some exceptions. I mean, there's places where they do okay, but by and large, things like even stuff like you know, finding CP and so forth. The situations where they do that are typically because they get a tip from somebody who's better at dealing with it, or somebody who comes across it. Because most people, of course, who comes across these sorts of things, if they they may report that to the police. So that's typically sort of the scenario there. And the other thing is that a lot of the people they catch are, yeah. And somebody says, I'm shocked. Will you be in the EDB Natalie Lawyer Chick / Boss Bree stream? I don't know. That might be sort of that might be a women in law kind of stream. I don't know, but I mean, I'm always down if I sort of get that, sorted. And somebody says, have I spoken to my local police yet? Ricada had to establish a relationship with them, so they knew it was likely hoax calls. Yes. As I mentioned, for a while, they were swatting a bunch of people who were reporting on Johnny Depp. And so there was a real possibility that I might get on that list. I had a lot of people who were sort of warning me about that. So I contacted my local police, and they were able to put a note on my file to say swatting risk. And so hopefully Edmonton police will see that if there's ever a swatting call and will respond appropriately. I talked to them and, sort of worked some things out there. So that's the hope. Keffels, from what I understand, had a previous swatting issue and, a previous threat of that, and had actually tried to contact her police to get something similar done, and they didn't do it. And that may also be a basis for liability. So, yeah, that is, yeah. And somebody's saying, is there a Canadian version of ICAC? I don't know what ICAC is. ICAC, what is that? That's the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force program. Yes, they do have various programs for that sort of thing. So, yeah, if I was one of them, I wanted to be safe. Raw Law Lumber needs to as well. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there are some really weird people out there. So, that is what it is. So somebody says, I have a file with the police. Is that normal? I mean, nothing about what I do is normal, right? I get more death threats than the average bear. I get more swatting risk than the average bear. So, it is what it is, right? So that's kind of where that sits. All right. So I see somebody saying, am I in danger of getting swatted because I sponsor Ian using my real name? Probably not. So you're at more risk of being swatted if the more public you are. And um, one thing is that some of the people doing this, like in Keffel's situation, it was probably somebody who hates Keffels and has an issue with them. Um, but there's people who are at higher risk. And some people just like to swat people who do live streams because they think it'll be funny to see on a live stream, because some people are messed in the head. Um, I see people saying, just don't give out personal information, folks. You leak personal information by accident. And I mean, it's just, but there's a reason why my About page has a P.O. box and not my home address. Um, that's part of it, because if you want to swat that, you'll be swatting a Canada Post Office. Yeah. Somebody says, do I have an LLB or a JD? I've got an LLB, although I'm eligible on sending them an email to get it switched over to a JD. They're the same degree in Canada. It's kind of weird. But the problem is that the LLB is different and like a lesser degree in some other countries. Whereas in the States, a JD is sort of the higher degree. So it's having the LLB can be difficult if you want to do international sorts of law. So yeah. Oh, and the other thing is I definitely have a file with the Canadian Firearms Canadian Firearms program. It's yeah. So, and somebody noted I have an interesting ex-husband, Deanna Vasello there, and I have a note with my address in the 911 system because he would call in reasons for a wellness check almost weekly. Yeah, so that is that's kind of its own aspect there. And yes, I somehow unbelievably get 1,000% more hate than Spiegel. I mean, Spiegel's an odd duck. I don't understand what Spiegel's deal is. The weirdest thing about Mr. Spiegel was that he wrote that op-ed where he was like blaming Johnny Depp for not coming to his defense, which is the weirdest thing I can think of. Like, yeah. So somebody else noted that that you're at greater risk if you're doing infosec stuff. And yep, there's all sorts of reasons why people might swat you, but people, if you're the kind of person who gets in criminals' way, it can happen. Similarly, sometimes I've made videos, pointing out that Freemen on the land are not the brightest legal theories at all. So, those folks can sometimes do that kind of thing and so forth. Yeah, I run an armed security agency and worry about swatting all the time. Had one applicant threaten to call police because he didn't get the job. What a great idea. Like, police told me they'll deal with the call as it comes in. Yes, that would be great if we actually thought that they, that they could do that, that they were able to do that. And I have Eugene 813, qui parle français sur en direct. Je veux pratiquer mon français. My French is not very good, but I did go to French immersion in elementary school. I'm just way out of practice. So it takes me a little bit of time to get back into my French. And I see people, what is it? Have I met a member of parliament? I've met several, both talking to them on like Zoom calls, but also in person. So I know a bunch of those and so forth. So I don't have any MPs like on my speed dial or anything like that, but I talk to MPs because I got political issues. So yeah. And a great deal of police departments are aware of swatting. They're aware of it. They're just not very good at dealing with it. That's the problem. Because what I don't hear is the situations like, I don't know, maybe I mean, if there's a police, department out there that would like to put somebody on to talk about the practices they do take. And if they, I would love to hear if there's some good examples of situations where the police got a report that was a swatting report and that they went, you know what, this is BS, and didn't roll out the tactical team. So, yeah, that's kind of thoughts there. All right, so somebody saying, have I been to the RCMP horse show? I have not. And talk to Detective Seeds. That might be a good one. So when I see Connie Clark, did I enjoy my time on set for the Lord of the Rings? Props. Yeah, the hair is getting longer still, but yeah. So yeah, no, that might be a good thing to discuss. But I mean, one thing I also want to do, I wanted to sort of do a just sort of a round of still a cop versus not a cop. So, chat, I've got years on the RCMP page from 2022 through to 2016. So, somebody toss out a year for between 2016 and 2022. And somebody says, am I going to do more on the rust shooting? Yes, I will. So, somebody toss me at a year here. And if I don't get a year, all right. First one I saw was 2018. All right. So let's have a look here. And then somebody give me a number from, I guess, 1 to 10 or 1 to 22. Give me a number. Just a random, I got a 7. All right. So we're going to look at number 7 from 2022 or from 2018 rather. And this is the case of Constable Jonathan Tremblay. So the way this game works is I am going to pull up the poll feature, and you may not want to vote until you got all the information. I got to see if I can actually do the poll feature. I got to figure out how I do that. I may have to just do a poll sort of as we go, but I'm just trying to see, how do I do polls? I have never done a poll before, so yeah. Yeah. Let's see how to do YouTube poll. I'll see if I can get this. Let me just see if I can get this working. If not, then we'll do what we can here. But all right, I don't know how to make this do a poll, so we'll just do an informal poll with people posting up numbers here. So somebody's saying, I hope you never tire of the elf jokes. They're so endearing. You got to lean into these things, man, because otherwise, if what is it? Otherwise, these people will go after you. But the elf thing is like, there's way worse things people could say here. So we'll just do a straw poll of still a cop versus not a cop. But let's have a look at Mr. Tremblay and see what he was alleged to have done. So the allegations were 4 allegations, 3 of discreditable conduct and 1 of unauthorized use of government equipment. 2 allegations were withdrawn and 1 allegation of discreditable conduct was admitted to. And the remaining one was, they had a hearing, and the remaining one was not established. So there was only 1 allegation that was actually admitted to, and yes. So I'm just looking at allegation number 2, which is the one that was admitted to. And do we actually have any details on this? Where is allegation 2? All right. This one is not very well written. Maybe I shouldn't have just gone with a random one as opposed to one I looked at here. So allegation 2 just says that it's made out. That's not super useful. What is... All right. I don't know what allegation 2 is on this one. So this one's not going to be super helpful. All right. I'm going to pick another number off of the chat here. So it was still a cop, but they didn't actually even say what he did. That's not super helpful. All right, I'm picking another one here. All right. So this is Constable Benjamin Karam, and this is from 2017. And I'm going to give a little warning here because some of these allegations are um, in the SA category. So be aware of that. So let me have a look here at what the allegations are on this one, because it's an SA allegation. So from the summary, they say he faced 3 allegations of discreditable conduct and 1 of discourteous and harassing behavior. He admitted to the 4 allegations, which were found to be established. So this was all admitted. So he attended a pre-Christmas party with his spouse, organized by members of her watch. So I'm guessing her spouse was also a constable. And the subject matter member became heavily intoxicated. He slung his arm over the shoulders of Constable A. They're not putting her name in because there's a publication ban, because she is the victim of an SA here. And without her consent, very briefly played with her nipple over her shirt. That's a quote from the RCMP thing. This event was laughed off at the time. Later, the subject member hugged Constable A from behind with his hands descending, still over her clothing from her stomach to her groin. Constable B observed this, told the subject member to leave the area. Constable A did not consent to this touching, was startled by it, but she had no recollection of it later due to her alcohol consumption, which is also concerning. Later, the subject member touched the cheekbones of another attendee, Constable C, with her consent. He then made gestures involving the fingers on one hand, which puzzled Constable C. Asked what the gesture meant, the subject member stated, using a crude term, that he wanted to put his fingers in her, and I'll just leave that out. Later, the subject member placed his arm around the shoulders of Constable C, who was intoxicated and did not consent, and grazed her nipple with his fingers about 3 times over her clothing. This was observed by Constable B, who pushed the subject member away. A criminal charge of SA was filed respecting Constable C, which was ultimately subject to resolution via an alternative measures program. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit here about what an alternative measures program is, because alternative measures here is normally, like where I am, normally you could not get that for an SA charge. Alternative measures lets you avoid getting a criminal conviction by doing like community service, kind of off the standard, thing. So usually here in Canada, or here in Alberta, this would be available to somebody who, for instance, was, shoplifting for the first time. And normally you only get 1 kick at alternative measures, but normally it's not available for crimes of violence, which all SA allegations are considered crimes of violence. Regardless, they're violent. And getting alternative measures for SA would be very unheard of, like to the degree that I wouldn't even suggest it as an option, right? It's just so far out there. It's like suggesting that the Crown prosecutor buy my client a drink and send him a thank you card, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. All right, so that's what we're talking about here, is guy who committed serious, this is a serious charge. It's an SA, right? So now in terms of, so all of this was admitted, and he was diagnosed with a long-standing social anxiety disorder that contributed to his overconsumption of alcohol. Now note that normally consuming alcohol is not really a defense to things. Absent his extreme level of intoxication, the subject member would not have behaved as he did. Okay, the subject member has now been abstinent from alcohol, attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and continued psychotherapy for social anxiety, adjustment disorder, and duty-related PTSD issues. Sufficient mitigating factors. So there was, mitigating factors. All right. So, can anyone sort of, let's see people's guesses on, whether you think this guy's still a cop or not a cop anymore. Just looking at the chat here. I'm seeing not a cop. I'm seeing now the chief. I'm seeing why is everyone saying still a cop? Lots of still a cop, still a cop. Somebody says still a cop, but had to have courses and maybe attend a version of AA. The chat is almost exclusively on still a cop. So let's look at what penalty, what penalty he got there. All right. So scrolling down here, what is the conclusion? Following conduct measures. Overall, or globally, I impose a formal reprimand for all contraventions, which is expressed by this final written decision, an order for transfer or reassignment, so he's not going to be at the same detachment. He's directed to undergo any treatment specified by the health services officer and to continue the psychotherapy he's receiving. Forfeiture of 10 days pay, another forfeiture of 10 days pay because there's multiple allegations, a further forfeiture of 5 days pay, and a further forfeiture of 20 days pay. So basically, he got a fine and a transfer. So, still a cop. When we say, when you say that, only the police should have guns because they are the people who are, who can be, trusted there. Keep in mind that they just moved this guy. I also just want to note that there's several major religions, and I'm not here to bash religion here. That's not the point of this, because this is a problem that shows up with every major organization. But one of the things that, a lot of these religions have been criticized for is that there are people who commit serious offenses that rather than get rid of them, they just kind of move them around. And I mean, is there a place where it's okay for somebody who is engaging in SA to B? Is that something that, that is fine if you just move a little further? So, yeah, that I'm not happy with that one. And we might say, oh, well, he was drinking. Well, if I get smashed on this, like if I get smashed on this live stream and were to expose myself, I would expect to see 0 subscribers left at the end of the day and deserve it. And B, I would expect to be charged. So like, why, we say we're holding police to a higher standard, but oh my God, no. I see Blue Smoke saying, spoiler alert, they're all still cops. I'm going to try to find at least one where they're not still a cop. So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is unpleasant. All right. So next one is, and I'm just sort of pulling them at random rather than doing the numbers thing each time here. Constable Sarah Brown. I'm just wondering if we just need to find ones where they've actually been, subject to conduct measures. All right. So this one had multiple allegations, and only one of them was substantiated. So the allegation that was substantiated was that she told coworkers that she dreamed that they would be shot attending a call. And I'm just going to see if we can find some additional details here because that's interesting. So during the month of August 2014, she told Constable EL that she dreamed of the day when a sergeant and a corporal go to a file and get shot. So she basically expressed a wish that some of her coworkers would get shot or killed on the line of duty. So I feel like that's kind of a big deal here because, I mean, when you are police officers, you need to rely on the other officers there. And so somebody going, I hope that, my colleagues get killed is really kind of undermining a lot of this. So that one was found to be admitted or to be a made out allegation. And And I'm just looking here. What do people say? Do we've got? I'm seeing a lot more not a cop here because this is a I'm seeing lady cop means not a cop. Blue smoke says still a cop. Blue smoke was the one with the super chat earlier saying everybody's going to be still a cop. And I see Sky is a neighborhood, but it was in a dream. Yes, but she said she dreamed of the day when they would get killed. Like that's an expression of, like, when I say I dream of the day when I can retire, that's saying it's something I want it to happen, right? She's not just going, "Hey, I had a weird dream that this happened." She's saying, "I'm hoping this happens." So I'm getting a ton of not a cop here. So I get most cops I know, easily 100s, want people to be able to protect themselves. They know they cannot always get there. Yes. And I mean, I'm doing this not because I want to bash cops generally. I'm doing this because I think that there's lots of good cops out there. And the good cops don't deserve to be working with bad cops. The good cops deserve to be working in a force that's all good cops. And we do them a great disservice. Anyway, her penalties were a reprimand, a financial penalty of 8 hours, direction to undergo medical treatment, and reassignment or transfer to another jurisdiction. So, survey says still a cop. Lots of people surprised by that one, just because. Female officer, they didn't get rid of her either. All right. Let's pull another one here. And I'm just having a look here. What do we have on this one? All right. So we've got somebody with who had a number of allegations, but allegations 2, 4, and 6 were made out for improper use of government issued equipment and property. All right. So allegation 2 is that he manipulated a conductive energy weapon, so a taser, in an unsafe or unauthorized manner. And the way he did that was that he entered the office space of a municipal employee working at the detachment, and tossed a couple of sheets of stapled paper on her hands while she was typing, who said to toss them back and said, "Don't ever do that to me again." And he removed the Taser X26 conductive energy weapon he was wearing from his holster and pointed it in her direction. Now, keep in mind that, legally speaking, that taser is probably a firearm. I would certainly expect that it would meet that test. I haven't yet been able to do a test on that because I'm still waiting for my firearms business license in order to be able to check that. But this looks like the crime of pointing a firearm at, and specifically at a coworker. So that's the first allegation that was made out. Yeah. And I mean, that could have gone off and people have died after being hit by tasers. So allegation 4 is on December 9th, while on duty, did use government-issued equipment or property for unauthorized purposes by manipulating a conductive energy weapon in an unsafe or unauthorized manner. Wow. All right. So, a watch clerk at the Strathcona County Detachment left her workstation to use the washroom. While in the washroom, the subject matter took position alongside a wall near the washroom door in such a manner that a person exiting would have their back to him. He drew his conductive energy weapon and, with the cartridge removed, turned it on and held it in his hand. A red laser beam projecting from the conductive energy weapon was visible on the wall, confirming that it was turned on, ready to be activated, but no cartridge in it. The conductive energy weapon is still capable of causing pain with the cartridge removed if a person's body comes into contact with the electric arc. When she exited the washroom, walking with her back towards the member, the subject member took a step towards her, raised the conductive energy weapon to be pointed at her back, and activated it from a distance of approximately 18 to 36 inches away, which created an electrical arc at the tip of the weapon, and the distinctive crackling sound of the cycling conductive energy weapon created by the electric arc sparking between the two prongs at the tip of the device caused her to startle. He was not authorized to use the conductive energy weapon in this manner. There was no valid operational or administrative reason to justify the use of the device. I should note here that they say Miss X in allegation 2 and also Miss X in allegation 4. I'm not sure if they're the same Miss X, but I would suspect that they are. So he's kind of persistently harassing this one person. And allegation 6 is using a government issued equipment for an unauthorized purpose by manipulating a conductive energy weapon in an unsafe or unauthorized manner. And he fired this one is that he was in full uniform sitting in a police vehicle. He fired a cartridge from his conductive energy weapon that sent the projectiles to the ground near the walkway. And so another officer heard the conductive energy weapon cycling, so the taser, and he saw the officer holding the expired cartridge, and he was displeased at having a taser deployed close to him without warning. Members are authorized to dispose of expired taser cartridges by firing the probes in a safe manner into the ground. However, in this case, he was in a patrol vehicle and shot the probes out the window onto a pathway near the detachment entrance without properly verifying that no one was in the vicinity. So this was not conducted in a safe manner in a controlled environment and was done in contravention of the code of conduct. So, two things. Tasers, as I mentioned, are almost certainly legally firearms because they can put your eye out if they puncture you. Also, just the being struck with a taser is probably in and of itself serious bodily injury or death. And the other thing is that tasers are also potentially a prohibited weapon because they have a stun gun feature. So also keep in mind that when an officer uses a weapon like this in a fashion that is not for his duties, then he may also be stepping outside of the exceptions to the law that allow him to possess these weapons when an ordinary civilian can't. And so this may also be the crime of possession of a prohibited firearm or prohibited weapon without authorization, which is a serious charge. So, seeing a lot of people still a cop, not a cop. I hope to God this guy is no longer a cop. So let's have a look at the penalty section here. Oh, and in terms of, the aggravating factor, the victim was significantly impacted by his behavior, both personally and professionally. No kidding. He was criminally charged for the actions described in allegation 2. However, he did plead guilty and received a conditional discharge, which should spare him a criminal record. Of course he did, right? Because of course he did. All right. And, his mitigating factors, he admitted the misconduct. He has no formal prior discipline. He enjoys the support of his peers. That just speaks badly for his peers. Remorseful for his actions and is unlikely to reoffend once he returns to active duty. I mean, he only did this repeatedly. So, it was just like one of those one-off things that happens one-off, one-off, one-off. Oh, right. That's not a one-off at all. All right. And he's a good worker. And aside from these incidents, he's regarded as a high performer. Yeah, I mean, he just tases all sorts of people. All right. And he also apologized to Miss X in writing. Okay, that's fantastic. Penalty, a reprimand and 15 days forfeiture of pay, a reprimand and 5 days forfeiture of pay, a reprimand and additional training with a qualified CW, so taser instructor, and transfer to another detachment. So if you said still a cop, he's still a cop. Yeah. I mean, my expectations were low, but they managed to go even further than I was expecting. All right, let's do a couple more of these. Just, I can't go through all of them, but yeah, this is one from 2019. Constable Devin Pulsifer. All right. So, actually, this is one I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to see. There's something interesting going on here. All right. So this one is a little complicated. I'm going to leave Pulsifer for a little later. We're just going to instead have a look at All right. What's a good one here? I'm just trying to find one where we actually. It's no good if they don't make out the allegations, because, of course, if they don't make out the allegations, then, the finding is that nothing happened, right? So, all right. How about this one here? Constable Judith Nolan. All right. I know that last time there were a lot of people who were sort of, you know, swayed by the fact that it was a female officer and going, not, not a cop as a result of that. But so we'll see if it's still the case with this constable here. All right. So Constable Nolan, 3 allegations of discreditable conduct, contrary to Section 7.1 of the RCMP Code of Conduct. So, and what happened on this one is that, and I'm just looking here, all 3 allegations were made out. And so she went on a 3-week trip to Florida, which is not a problem. Like, as much as Canada and the US talk shit about each other, she's allowed to go to Florida. However, getting a dry throat here. She failed to declare goods of a value exceeding $800, and she made false declarations to the 2 officers in contravention of Section 12 of the Customs Act. So she lied to police officers. She also is alleged to have made several inappropriate comments to Officer LB, and that her misconduct caused the officer to feel intimidated. Finally, it is alleged that Constable Nolan provided misleading information to her supervisor regarding the incident. So she lied as well, or misled. They avoid using the word lie here, but she misled her supervisor about what was going on all of this. So what are they saying happened? She's a member of the Nexus program, designed to speed up border crossings for low-risk, pre-approved travelers into Canada and the United States. And, as a RCMP member, she would have no problem, I don't think, getting a Nexus pass. So she was returning to Canada via the Pierre Elliott Trudeau International Airport, which I recommend avoiding after a 3-week personal trip to Florida, not just because it's badly named, but also the airport sucks. She had in her possession goods of a value exceeding $800, which she'd purchased in the United States. She was unable to use the Nexus kiosk, so she presented herself at the special services counter, and she was asked standard questions, including what the value of in Canadian dollars was of any things purchased outside of the country. She declared $600. CBSA noted this as something for a selective referral, so she was sent off to secondary examination, and she was presented, and she handed over 4 receipts with a total value of approximately $1,031.79 in Canadian dollars, which is, of course, not $600. While conducting an examination of the check bag, they found 3 additional receipts that she hadn't turned over for a total value of $1,212.58, which she had failed to disclose and provide at the primary checkpoint. She falsely declared that the goods were gifts that she had received. She failed to declare goods of a value exceeding $800 and made false declarations, which these are declarations that you are required to be truthful on by law. So this is a crime of honesty, right? Or this is an offense of honesty, rather. And keep in mind, the fundamental thing that police officers have to do is be honest in court. When a police officer says, "Hey, listen, court, at this point, I approached the suspect and he reached for a nut, he reached for a pocket, and I was concerned that he had a knife there." We need to believe that that's actually what happened, right? Because otherwise, if it's just the officer's like, "Yeah, and I just shot him because I didn't like the looks of him," that's a very different scenario. We need to have some trust in the police here. All right. So, particulars. So, allegation 3, engaged in discreditable conduct. Or sorry, allegation 2. I skipped over allegation 2. So once she was When she presented herself at a secondary examination, she immediately told the CBSA officer that she works for the government in national security and knew why she was there. The officer said, "Your occupation is not relevant, as any person entering in Canada is subject to examination." And apparently she continued to bring it up. So the suggestion here is that she might have been trying to use her position as a police officer for personal gain and to be able to get away with an offense. So that's a problem. Like that's now raising some, sort of corruption issues. All right. So you told the officer that they, customs officers, did not like the RCMP, which was the reason you were constantly targeted and harassed, and that it was discrimination against white females. Muffin. Officer LB queried your passage history and confirmed that it was your first referral for secondary examination. So she's complaining about how she's being targeted and, harassed and so forth. And the officer's just like, I can check this. Beep. Oh, wait, no, this is the first time this has ever happened to you. Yeah. I don't know if she asks to see a manager next. We'll find that out, but I kind of am getting I need to see your manager vibes on all of this. You also made several inappropriate comments to the officer, such as, don't they think they should be spending more time on people who are likely to blow up planes? Some groups are just more likely to commit crimes. It's a known fact that the CBSA don't like RCMP. I arrest people for a living, so it's possible I have traces of drugs. Why are you not using your discretion? Discretion is code word. When police officers talk about discretion to other, officers, what it means is you should let me off because I'm an officer, because I'm a police officer. Why it took so long to do paperwork when it takes them, in quotation marks, 10 minutes to arrest a terrorist. This is how the country thanks me after all I've done. It's a fucking gong show. So, some groups are just more likely to commit crimes, huh? That sounds like some racism to me. That's kind of a concerning thing. So we've got a police officer who was dishonest and apparently dropping some real spicy comments. Let's see where this goes. So, and they basically found that this was inappropriate towards the officer and caused her to feel that you were trying to intimidate her, because of course that is exactly what that looks like. And allegation number 3 is, she then, returned back to work, and she told her supervisor that upon her return to Canada, she was sent to secondary examination, that she'd omitted to declare the items purchased and used during the trips, which were of value approximately $600. And you also told him that the Nexus cars was seized, which was not sort of the accurate retelling of what happened there. All right. Yeah, because she didn't say that she had, lied about what was going on. So lots of people on the sort of cop versus not a cop. I'm just kind of getting seeing still a cop versus not a cop, not a cop, not a cop, because this is not the Canadian way. Sure hope not a cop. Why is she taking her work bag with drugs on holiday? That is a really good question. I mean, here's a pro tip. Don't tell the officer that you think your bag is going to, set off the drug screen. Like, that one, that's just a genius move there. So, she admitted that her language was not polished. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look here in terms of conduct measures. Aggravating factors. Officer LB was negatively impacted by the interaction. She described the incident as remarkable in her 8-year career. And following the incident, she sought the advice from her supervisor to determine whether Constable Nolan's behavior should be reported. Constable Nolan contravened the Customs Act, which is a federal statute. The misconduct involves a lack of honesty, integrity, and professionalism, which are fundamental breaches of her obligations as a police officer and the RCMP core values. And under the implications of the McNeil decision, she will now have a legal requirement to disclose her misconduct with Crown Counsel in all matters where she will be called upon to give evidence as a witness, which could affect her ability to testify in criminal proceedings or to be assigned to another position in the context of various employment. Because what the McNeil decision says is that if there's an officer who has a conduct decision that says that they have been, doing bad things that are relevant to, that are relevant to your job, that has to be turned over to defense counsel. Defense counsel has to be able to know that this police officer is maybe not honest. All right. So, what are her mitigating factors? She apologized and said it was not her finest moment. She has 15 years of productive service, and her performance evaluations are very positive and describe her as a member who is dedicated, always willing to assist and provide other advice to others when called upon, has a positive working attitude. She's enthusiastic and self-motivated. No record of prior discipline and no criminal conduct. And she has letters of character reference provided from coworkers and supervisors, confirming that they have their ongoing support. Again, this actually is really embarrassing because, the letters do not indicate whether the writer was aware of the exact allegations against the constable. And she confirmed that everyone who wrote a letter was informed of the conduct process pending against her. So they have been considered as a mitigating factor. All right. Ultimate decision. Financial penalty of 45 days deducted from her penalty or from her pay. Ineligibility for promotion for 3 years. A direction to work under close supervision for a period of 1 year. And a direction for her to apologize in writing to Officer LB as well as to Corporal Sebastian Parent. And that's to happen as soon as possible. So, still a cop. Still a cop. We're not doing so well on the on all of this so far. All right. Yeah, this is kind of you kind of start wondering, what does it take to get fired here, right? So I guess let's pull up another one here just to see what we're looking at. Civilian member Marco Calandrini. So he's a civilian member of the police force, which means he doesn't do, arrests and so forth. He's just, he does something else on all of these. So he's not sort of a sworn officer. All right. So the allegations on this are allegations of SA and harassment. So I'm just going to find the details here and just make sure that all of them were made out. Just making sure that all of these were made out before I go and say all of this. Looks like they were. There's a big whole proceeding on the procedural history because there was appeals and so forth. So allegation 1, failed to treat every person with respect and courtesy and also engaged in harassment. And so the allegation is that he was that a public service employee, the complainant, was employed as the office/course administrator for the something that is redacted. You did not supervise the complainant. However, it was permissible for you to ask or task him with completing various administrative work relating tasks for you. So not a direct supervisor, but somebody who's kind of an underling who that can be directed to do various things, right? So I've worked at a lot of firms where I'm not the boss of the assistant, but the assistant is also my assistant. And so I can't fire them, but I can tell them I need this work done, right? That kind of relationship seems to be what the circumstance is there. So engaged in disrespectful and demeaning conduct of a sexually belittling nature directed towards the complainant in the workplace. And that is, on one occasion, while the complainant was using the photocopier, you approached him from behind and proceeded to sexually harass him by first physically touching his buttocks and then sliding your hand towards his inner thigh area. You informed the complainant in a sexually suggestive manner that you've got a great ass, and the complainant immediately indicated that your physical conduct was unwanted and to never touch him again. You replied by stating that you were simply joking around. Now, note, simply joking around is almost never a defense in law, but this is a crime, is the simple element of this. This is a criminal offense that they're detailing here. All right, so allegation 2 is another occasion. While the complainant was seated in the common lunchroom area, you sat next to him and then proceeded to sexually harass him by sliding your hand towards his inner thigh area. You further humiliated the complainant by openly verbalizing to the other employees present in the lunchroom that you've got such beautiful legs, right, guys? Ha 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 ha. The complainant immediately indicated that your physical conduct was unwanted and to never touch him again. You replied by stating that you were simply joking around. So another criminal offense. Allegation 3, failed to treat every person with respect and courtesy. And on one occasion, while the complainant was seated at his office desk working, you sneaked up behind him and then proceeded to sexually harass him by shoving your hand inside of his shirt from the collar, sliding your hand across his torso, and then stopping on his chest area. You further humiliated the complainant by openly verbalizing that, "Oh, nice pecs you got going on. It doesn't show." The complainant immediately indicated that your physical contact was unwanted and to never touch him again. You replied by stating that you were simply joking around. All right. So what do people think on this one? Still a cop, not a cop. And do people have reasons for that one? Because, yeah, just so you know, what is it? I'm just joking around is pretty much never a defense in law. There are some very rare cases where it might actually be, but not for this. Not for this. Not for pretty much anything involving touching another person. And so I see Uncivil Law says Runkle, and he's got... I'll just let you guys read that one. I see people saying not a cop because civilian. I see still a cop but moved. Still a cop. Still a cop, of course. I would have punched the guy. Yep. There's some certain thoughts about that. Still a cop, and because Rainbow, we'll get to that. Still a cop because allies. Still a cop. Not a cop, just joking around. Still a cop. Not a cop, still a cop. Not a cop to begin with, and that's kind of one element of all of this. So still a cop harassing a guy. All right, let's have a look at what the ultimate result was. So this, as I mentioned, was an appellate decision. And so they note that the decision of the original board, which was to dismiss this officer, so to fire him, was the appeal was dismissed and the conduct measure imposed by the board is confirmed, which was to fire him. This is our first example, folks, of not a cop no more. But as people mentioned, he was a civilian member, so he's kind of not a sworn officer in the first place. He was fired. This guy was fired. And there's all sorts of reasons why this might be, but it's really interesting that the guy out there who is committing assaults against his female coworkers stays on, and the guy committing assaults against male coworkers is fired. So the people who were suggesting sort of discrimination on this, it might have been the other way around on this one. And the other aspect, but I suspect the bigger aspect on this one is that the civilian member. That's what I'm kind of suspecting, is that the civilian member was a huge thing there. So yeah. So this guy is not an officer anymore. And we'll look at one more because this one I think is real interesting. So this one is Constable Devin Pulsifer. And this one starts, the first conduct hearing is 2019. Or actually, this is not the first one. This is an appeal. And I'm just looking here. Where's the allegation? All right. So Allegation number 1. So these are the allegations he faced. Were they both confirmed? I just got to find that before I go ahead. So sufficient evidence on allegation 1 and sufficient allegation on allegation number 2 with an asterisk. All right, so now I can tell you guys what happened. All right, so these are the findings of the conduct board. So while a tactical troop social gathering at the Wayfarers Ale Society, a licensed establishment in Port Williams, Nova Scotia, where he was at training at a Canadian Forces base, he consumed alcohol to the point of rendering himself intoxicated. He approached Constable 1, whose name is redacted because she's the victim of an offense here, from behind and placed your hands under her shirt. You moved your hands up and grabbed Constable 1's breasts. Constable 1 pushed your hands away. Corporal Berger, another member of the tactical troop who observed your actions, pulled Constable 1 away from you. Constable 1 had never met you prior to this incident. Constable 1 did not consent to being touched in this manner, and this was in plain view of other tactical troop members, and you were later removed from the bar and brought back to the base by other tactical troop members. So this is a crime, right? This is a criminal offense because touching for a sexual purpose without consent is a criminal offense. That's the criminal offense of SA. So yeah. Somebody says, didn't we have another Pulsifer? I brought this one up and then I said I'd cover it later. So yes, we are there. I did mention the name, but now we're actually looking at the case here. So this is exciting times for. So yes, and then allegation number 2 is that again at the Wayfarers Ale Society, which is still a bar, it's the same bar, of course, consumed alcohol to the point of rendering himself intoxicated. Approached Constable 2 from behind while she was standing at the bar. So different constable. You placed your hand underneath her shirt and moved it across her bare stomach, moved your hand upwards and touched her breasts. This was the allegation. I mentioned that there was an asterisk on this one, and they ultimately found that they couldn't establish that he'd actually touched her breasts, but they had said that he touched her stomach and moved upwards. They just couldn't determine if he actually made contact, which, again, for the purpose of this being a crime is irrelevant because it was found that he had, that this was for a sexual purpose. So Constable 2 recognized you as a member of the tactical troop, but had never spoken. Oh, sorry. I'm leaving out some details, and these are good details. I like these details. Constable 2 swatted your hand away and continued the conversation she was having with another member. Despite Constable 2 swatting your hand away, you again placed your hand underneath her shirt and began moving upwards towards her breast. That's not the detail I like. The detail I like is this part. Constable 2 turned around to face you and struck you in the face. Constable 2. Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely down with that one. There's at least a little bit of justice on this one. All right. So they noted that Constable 2 recognized him as a member of the tactical troop, but had never spoken to him before. She didn't consent to being touched in this manner. This was in plain view of other troop members. In fact, he touched Constable 2 a short time after touching Constable 1 in the manner described in allegation 1, and that this was, in fact, something that he did twice. Like, there can't be any mistake about consent because he was already stopped. So, yeah. All right. So, Constable Pulsifer, who got punched in the face, I like this quote. I'm going to read this quote here. All right. It is noteworthy that after the subject member's second attempt to touch Constable 2's breasts, Constable 2 turned around and punched him in the face. Constable 2 did not strike the subject member with maximum force, but nevertheless delivered an unambiguous message about his unwanted and offensive behavior. One would hope that he would take that as unambiguous. All right. So, yeah, it's kind of a messed up scenario. So, all right. And I'm guessing he probably has the usual mitigating circumstances of, you know, so he submits all of his commendations and so forth. Aggravating circumstances, degree of seriousness of the misconduct is high in and of itself. As emphasized in the Calandrini decision, the RCMP has, through repeated messaging to its employees, communicated that workplace harassment, including sexual harassment and off-duty non-consensual sexual misconduct, like crimes, are all unacceptable and will not be ignored nor tolerated. We'll see about that. In the absence of any diagnosis of alcohol addiction or a substance use condition or some other mental health issue that contributed to excessive consumption of alcohol, I view it as aggravating that the subject member would render himself so intoxicated as to become disinhibited and sexually touch two coworkers. While the subject member did not face an allegation that he rendered himself unfit for duty, and while it is apparent that a number of attendees at the pub were intoxicated by the end of the evening, putting in doubt the overall benefit of a so-called team-building social event while training continued, drinking to the point of being unable to account for one's actions isn't at an off-duty but work-related social event constitutes an episode where personal responsibility was clearly lacking. And that's noted as an aggravating factor. So I like that. Because I don't like when they put down, oh, well, he was drinking and call it mitigating, because that's not mitigating, for most people there. And the impact of his misconduct on the two constables who were subjected to his unwanted touching must be considered aggravating, even if only Constable 1 provided a formal statement as a victim. Let's have a look at that statement details in a bit. The misconduct violated the important trust that should exist between fellow police officers and coworkers, and a number of other members observed some aspect of his misconduct. So, and I questioned the representatives on the fact that no harassment process, including harassment investigation, was performed in this matter, and it was from its inception treated internally as a code of conduct matter, mainly because of the nature of the alleged misconduct, but possibly because Constable 1 and Constable 2 provided statements to the initial criminal investigation, but did not complain of harassment by formally filing the applicable form. Now, I don't know did he get some actual penalty here in terms of I'm just trying to see if he actually got some sanction on this, because I mean, this is serious criminal misconduct, right? This is a serious, serious issue here. Now I'm just trying to find here her victim impact statement, or because Constable 1 indicated that she was very much harmed by this, that this was something that caused her a great deal of stress and strain and difficulty and so forth. So mitigating circumstances. So he was, he admitted or did not dispute the particulars for both allegations. So essentially a guilty plea. He provided apologies, and they accept that he's genuinely remorseful for his actions. No prior discipline, and said that he's never been the subject of a public complaint. Above average policing duties, and has consistently demonstrated an impressive work ethic and commitment to additional roles with the ceremonial troop and tactical team. This is apparently a guy they trust with the big guns. This is a door kicker. So that's scary. The person who kicks down the door might be this guy, Constable Gropey. That's not good. Letters of letters of support, and they say that this was an isolated incident and out of character. Okay. They declined to find any mitigation on his mental state, but he did participate in counseling. He's remained abstinent from alcohol since. And yeah. All right. So what do people think on still a cop versus not a cop no more? Somebody say, I suck at this game. All right. What do people think? Yes, and I did say Constable Gropey. So I'm seeing still a cop, Still a cop. Oh, still a cop. He's on tactical right. Constable McGropey said it was just dark. He was feeling his way around. Oh, that's bad. Yes, obviously it is in character. He would not have done it. Yes. I get drunk at the bar. You know, it's a thing. Like, you go to the bar, you get drunk sometimes. This has never happened. So, yeah. I'm seeing everybody, almost everybody says still a cop. There is a not a cop. This guy's still a cop. Bet money on it. All right. Was it? Going to call it still a cop or still a cop, but transferred. All right. Let's have a look at the eventual punishment on this one. So, following conduct measures were imposed: a reprimand for each allegation, forfeiture of 15 days pay for the first allegation, the forfeiture of 20 days pay for the second allegation, ineligibility for promotion for a period of 2 years, and a direction to receive any counseling with respect to alcohol abuse or addiction, or any other counseling seen as appropriate. So, still a cop, and not even moved, but of course he was at a training thing, so it was unlikely that he was working with these two officers. But there is a follow-up. It is Constable Pulsifer Round 2. And this is an appeal filed by the Conduct Authority. And so what this means is that the police force, or the police, sort of the representative for punishment on this one, actually went a step further and said, you know what? We don't like this guy. We really think that this guy should be not a cop. And you know what? I agree with them, because here is what the public has to think, right? As a member of the public, I'm not a woman, but like, there are women who get arrested or who get pulled over for, they're intoxicated in public, they're whatever else. And this guy might be the guy throwing handcuffs on them and throwing them in the back of a police cruiser. And this might happen alone on a dark street. Or, his fellow officers might be sitting there. He might be riding with a partner who might be a female officer and might end up being injured and needing medical attention. Like, what are we supposed to think about all of this, right? So they actually appealed and said, we want this guy to not be a cop. We want him not a cop. We mean it. And I think that's the right call, because we should not, like, if I committed these offenses, if I did this, I would expect that I would, A, see the inside of a jail cell, B, not be a lawyer anymore, and C, get a firearm ban. And that firearm ban would also prevent him from doing police officer things, right? So, but he is apparently, no problem. All right, so let's look at what ends up happening. So they issued that decision that I mentioned. And so the commanding officer of H Division was seeking a dismissal. He wanted this guy terminated. And so he's appealing this. And so this goes to a decision-making process. They review all of the allegations. They review all of the things. They note this one, we've actually got some additional exhibits on. And so I'm going to read some of these letters of support, just because I actually kind of think that it's relevant to hear what some of these people are saying. So Staff Sergeant GDS, retired. I am writing this letter in support of Constable Devin Pulsifer. I was the NCO of X District RCMP from a time. He was transferred to that division. I'm aware of the allegations that are the subject of his code of conduct. In fact, I was the member who served the documentation initiating the code of conduct review. During the 9 months that Constable Pulsifer worked at X District, he consistently displayed leadership traits that were noteworthy. He was not the type to engage in detrimental bullpen banter. He always displayed a positive can-do attitude. He was knowledgeable, and where he did not immediately have an answer to a circumstance, he could determine an appropriate course of action through research, consultation, and finally seeking direction from the writer. In short, Constable Pulsifer has clear problem-solving skills and abilities that he and I could rely upon. Yes, he is capable of solving problems, like that his coworkers are wearing shirts. Okay, and I mean that with the greatest contempt to the officer that I can, give here, because that is like saying he's a good problem solver in this context is just kind of like, what the hell? All right. At the time of his transfer, we were chronically understaffed due to long-term ODS issues with several members. We were consistently missing 25% of our unit to long-term operational disabilities, I think it is, including one of the two corporals. Due to Constable Pulsifer's leadership traits, and despite more senior members at our unit, I placed him in the role of acting corporal for several months. He had the required personal attributes, investigatory skill sets, and flexibility to bring those members along to perform at an acceptable level. Furthermore, Constable Pulsifer has had the solid support of all the members at the unit, including the PSE staff. In fact, I can confidently state all staff are eager for his return to duty. This is, again, not like this is the police force telling on themselves. This is telling on themselves. Like, this guy has committed a very serious criminal offense, and we're all thrilled to have him back. No, stop it. Okay, so yeah. All right, let's continue here. As indicated, we consistently had critical HR issues that were very detrimental to our unit. Constable Pulsifer was one of the members whom I could rely upon to change his schedule and or adapt to the challenges without negative comment. It was clear that Constable Pulsifer recognized that in part his role was to try to keep the operation afloat as best we, and specifically he, could. In short, Constable Pulsifer's overarching desire was to get the tasks done to his best of his ability. Constable Pulsifer's courage in violent circumstances was evident in one circumstance where he and I were responding to a suicidal female call. The call was the female was armed with a knife. Arriving on scene prior to the writer, he approached the second-story landing of the residence and was confronted on the narrow landing by a vicious pit bull dog. Constable Pulsifer deemed it necessary to discharge his service pistol at the animal, injuring it and causing the dog to flee. He heroically killed a dog. This is not a point in favor, guys. He then effected a detention of the, we don't know if he killed the dog or just injured the dog very badly, but he then effected a detention of the subject female under lawful authority. Upon my arrival on scene, the other family members were enraged and very hostile. Constable Pulsifer remained on scene until further backup could attend. In these circumstances, he displayed tremendous courage, and his actions in these circumstances were noteworthy. Yeah, okay. Here's the problem is that, now if he's ever, arresting or, dealing with a woman alone, there's going to be some questions as to whether that's all that happened, right? So, yeah, I kind of feel like shot a dog is not the thing to trot out as like a moment of heroism. So, yeah. I retired in August 2018 after 36 and a half years of police service. I've seen my share of members in both municipal policing and the RCMP. I would certainly not hesitate to have Constable Pulsifer work for me. Again, this is not a good thing. He was easily in the top percentage of solid members I've had the opportunity with whom to work. I always look forward to Constable Pulsifer working his day shifts, as I knew there'd be little intervention required by myself. Furthermore, as directed, I can confidently state he has the support of his fellow members and DSA staff at X District. All right, I'm going to skip over some of these. Maybe I'll catch up on, there's a few super chats that I should cover here before I get too far behind here. So I see, Runkle, COVID forced vaccinations have caused a lot of good cops to leave the service. We have the same problem here in the U.S. Yeah, they are having some staffing issues. I can also say that I know some that are not good people, let alone good cops, and I wouldn't want them to be a dog catcher with the things they do. I mean, I don't know that this was great dog catching going on here, but your comment preceded that. Taser guys has issues. I guess he got away with it. He did indeed. Vicky Wade, thank you for the very generous super sticker. And Lisa Proust Research, congrats for Uncle. I thought you would never find one dismissed done. It, I may have had to sort of dig for that one. That one was kind of a bit of salt because I did look and had to find that one with some effort. Uh, Marcus Miller is, $1 there. Thank you for the $1 there. And they're saying 90% of cops were worse than this guy. Yeah, isn't that kind of like saying something here? But he's the best cop we have. Yeah, if this is your best, like if this is the top of the bar, that's a problem. So yeah. All right. So yeah, there's other people who offer support talking about how he's a great team player and so forth. I don't know that I put a whole lot of weight on him being a team player. But we have Constable 1 who filed a victim impact statement. So she indicated what the impact was on her. So I'll read that here. And so she noted, on Tuesday evening, April 17th, 2018, I was enjoying a social evening out with my coworkers, fellow tactical troop members, teammates, friends, brothers and sisters of the force, when I was sexually assaulted by an unknown to me male. I call him unknown to me for many reasons. I had not yet had the opportunity to even introduce myself to this person, as he'd only just completed his second day of training with the troop. Unknown to me because I never imagined in my 13.5 years of being a strong female member of the RCMP, a 40-year-old mother of 2 children, that this could ever happen to me, especially at the hands of a fellow member of the RCMP, a police officer! Exclamation mark. Unknown to me because I learned his name after the incident and I have removed it from my head. Whenever this incident is discussed, I don't even repeat his name because I never want to hear his name again. Don't get me wrong, I do know his name, but his name, in my opinion, does not deserve to be repeated. As a matter of fact, receiving an email requesting me to write this very statement with his name being in the subject line triggered a sick feeling in my stomach. I always felt very safe working with and socializing with my brothers and sisters of the force. To think that we have each other's backs in times that can be the most terrifying, most devastating, we stick together and work together to ensure the public is safe and fight together to safely go home to our families at the end of every shift. God willing. How could I have ever imagined that one of my own could do this to me? When this first happened to me, I had a few friends on the troop come forward to offer their support, but so many didn't even take the time to check in and simply ask, "How are you doing?" I was very hurt by some who I believed were true friends, and they all seemed to care, and all they seemed to care about was how this incident made the troop look. Wow! Double exclamation mark. I'm sure if it was were their wife, daughter, sister, or mother, they would be much more compassionate. I'm actually still very disappointed myself for not taking this matter criminally, but for me, dealing with CERT, the Special Investigation Response Team, was a horrible experience. 2 months after the incident, I ended up at emergency as I was falling asleep behind the wheel. I had no idea I wasn't sleeping. For the past month, after being asked to work on the statement and bringing everything back to the service, I'm again not sleeping very well. I'm also holding a lot of resentment towards the force for no one ever following up with me and updating me on this matter, where it stands, and besides being on leave with pay, not knowing the status of the accused. I reached out 5 months after the incident and got the reply, "Privacy issues," and "Let me inquire into a couple of things and I will get back to you." Wow. So let's just leave the victim in the dark while this file sits waiting to be there. Are there any other victims out there because of him? And I'm sure that they had good reasons not to get back to her and not to provide her with support because, they were all so busy writing letters of support for Mr. Pulsifer. They were all so busy explaining how he is willing to move his schedule around to be there and can shoot a dog if he has to. All right. Carrying on because it keeps going. I will forever hope he will remain unknown to me. I would never want to cross paths with this person again in my lifetime, but most importantly, in my career. I am a proud member of the RCMP and hold the force to a high standard, but having said this, I feel the RCMP has a lot of work to do for their membership, and by continuing to keep members in the force that are capable of such actions is a horrible representation of who we are as an organization. In my opinion, it is completely unacceptable to allow this person to continue to be a police officer. I'm praying the RCMP will not disappoint me and so many other women in the force who've been a victim at the hands of other members. As a female member, I've worked very hard to get where I am. In many cases, there is still a boys' club, but I can see the force is finally starting to level out the playing field. I've wanted to be on the H Division TAC troop for several years. I was finally selected in October 2017, and in my very next training session, this is what I had to endure. I hope this member gets the help and support he needs so that something like this doesn't happen again. To be honest, it would have been nice to get an apology from him if he was, in fact, sorry for his actions. Perhaps my healing process could have begun months ago and not almost a year after the fact. I like to think of this as just another bump in my road that will only make me stronger and better. So, and this is the thing. Like when I talk about, bad police officers, the reason why I do this is not to bash, I don't think of myself as anti-cop, but I think of myself as being in the corner of that police officer, that woman who says that she should not have to deal with this crap, who should be able to trust her people, and who should not be sitting there surrounded by people who not only didn't reach out to her, but also are writing letters about how excited they are to have him back. Everybody can't wait to have this guy back in business. What the hell, right? That's where I come in on this. I'm anti-sexual assault. I feel like that is not a big, giant thing. So yeah. Let's get to what the ultimate appeals decision is, because yeah. And she didn't proceed with criminal charges. She probably asked that they be dropped. In Canada, you don't have a right as the complainant to drop charges because that is, in fact, it's the Crown that pursues the case. But if she indicates that she doesn't want to proceed, then ultimately the Crown is going to take that very seriously, especially in a case with this kind of emotion around it, right? Because the Crown doesn't want to cause further damage to a victim of an offense. So, disposition. Pursuant to paragraph 45.16 sub 3 sub A of the RCMP Act, I confirm the conduct measures imposed by the board. Which means he's still a cop. This guy is still a cop. And I just want to call some attention here to because the person who made this decision is somebody who's in the news. And that person is Brenda Lucky. She's in the news right now because she is the official who is getting criticized for her behavior on with regards to the shooting inquiry and the fact that she was trying to push for the release of information that the police force was saying should not be released because she was getting pressure from political from up high, namely, the Trudeau government, to help release this information to support their gun ban. So that kind of stuck out at me, right? When I saw that name, I went, holy shit. This is the stuff that pisses me off as a defense lawyer, because, people would go, how can you represent people? And it's like, everybody deserves a chance to be represented. But this system that we see here in terms of the police discipline is a sick system. There is something wrong with what I see here, because, when I mentioned, hey, I've managed to find a case of not a cop no more, it wasn't easy. I had to dig for it. I had to search for that. I actually, as I said, I salted my selection with, there's got to be at least one not a cop no more, right? You can't have, it's not a game if there's not at least one time. And I see somebody saying Brenda is a man. I don't think so. pretty sure that's Brenda Lucky. I believe she's the head out there. It's yeah, this is just kind of disappointing circumstances here. It's I yeah. Somebody asks, do you have to represent them if they're lying? You can get ethical issues that come up when somebody is lying, but you can still represent them. So, uh, I mean, this is really concerning, right? The public has a right to feel safe from the police. The public has a right to feel, a woman who is getting in the back of a police car because she's being picked up for public intoxication or, whatever offense, should have a right to feel safe that the officer in question is not somebody who, if they were a civilian, might be on the registry, right? And I'm not talking about a firearms registry here. So, police also deal with, people who are in stressful situations. Like, this is part of what police deal with. They deal with people who are drunk. They deal with people who are mentally ill. They deal with people who are in emotional crisis. They deal with people who are in all sorts of terrible scenarios, right? And so when we have situations of officers behaving violently, that's a concern because those people also should be protected. And they should only really have, violence done to them if it's absolutely necessary, right? The police should be reluctant to use violence, but I mean, I've covered some of these cases where we see these officers who have used too much force and so forth. So this is frustrating. I'll do this again. Like, I will go through and we'll do some additional, still a cop, not a cop, but I mean, we've got this super chat, which I think is kind of relevant. If he's the top bar, they're limbo dancing in hell. And I'll just note here, the ACLU claims that the registry shames people and should be abolished. I'll note, Canada does a registry. We do have a registry, but it's not a public-facing registry. Like, I, as a member of the public, can't go and look up my neighbor and go, are they on the registry? It's a registry for police use, for police to track, for police to track people, for police to, if there's an offense, they can look up the registry and see if there's somebody who maybe, fits that and so forth. So yeah, it's that I see. Would I be less critical if a normal civilian was judged by the same standards instead of a lot harsher? I mean, equality before the law is an important principle. I don't think that there should be a whole lot of people out there committing sexual assaults and not getting, punishment there. But I mean, I would like to see the same standard. So yeah. Hey, I'm in my undergrad in law. How could I get involved in firearms law? Read like hell. One thing is that if you are a law student, you will feel like you are way too busy, and you are. You are also some of the least busy that you will ever be in the rest of your life. And so, and you'll also have great access to databases that you can still just look up and stuff and so forth. So I recommend you use those databases. What I did in law school, a ton of, was I put in firearms and I just started reading cases. Because that's how you learn, is you just focus your head on it, because there really isn't, most classes don't, or most universities don't have like a firearms law course that you could take. So you're going to have to learn all of this yourself, which sucks. But learning the law yourself is an important skill. So somebody says, any idea how legal system can properly protect victims of SA without its current regime of trampling on and driving underground the BDSM community? You pretty much can't. Right now in Canada, BDSM is basically illegal. And I could probably do a video on that, but it would probably have to be on locals because it's an SA case. But it basically means that it is functionally impossible, or most of the stuff that the BDSM community does to establish sort of consensual non-consent, which a lot of people won't really get the meaning of, but it's important if you do criminal law. Like if you do criminal law, you need to understand what all of this means. Most of the stuff that is done for that, legally speaking, doesn't mean a thing. So yeah, I'm still alive. Yep, got a pulse. So that is a good thing. Somebody says, pretty sure the BDSM community doesn't mind getting trampled on. Quality joke. Quality right there. I will give that a point there. Gordon Ramsay, BDSM ain't illegal. I have participated in a couple of sessions. I can tell you that it's not inherently illegal, but a lot of the things the BDSM community thinks provide them with legal protection, and I think that their beliefs on that are reasonable. They're just wrong because they don't, according to the law. There's a case called Goldfinch, and it's messed up in terms of its application for that. So I'll do a video on locals about that one at some point because it makes it very difficult, and some of the stuff there is a problem. I actually had and this is kind of weird, I had a group want me to do a talk about how to do BDSM legally in Canada, and I sort of sent them back an email saying, here is all the places where you actually may be committing an offense, and they're like, wow, this talk will be way too much of a downer, so please don't. We may not, you may scare everyone out of the community. And I was like, okay. So and somebody says, am I mixing up consensual non-consent in particular rather than BDSM writ large from a legal sense? Yes and no. And this is a much more complicated video. So consensual non-consent itself is a problem. Safe words are probably not effective, legally speaking. And but in terms of the writ large thing, there's a whole bunch of legal issues. There are a few. I kind of feel like I'm not the person to talk about the sort of nitty gritty of all of this, because like I am probably way more boring than we need for this, but it would be kind of fun if I could, find for a locals live stream kind of a somebody said Runkle after dark. I mean, that would be kind of fun, just to bring on somebody with maybe a little bit more experience in that community, and we could have a discussion. And yeah. And somebody says, what does SA stand for? Sexual assault. This video is probably getting demonetized, but it is what it is. So and I see Secret McSquirrel saying, I know somebody, you know how to reach me, Secret McSquirrel. So, and I'm getting yes to Runkle After Dark. All right. So, and why can't we get adult on YouTube? Because YouTube are terrible for that. Is the problem that someone could participate and then sue or charge their partner with assault/SA, and they can't legally protect themselves from that? Yes. And also, the Crown is the one who lays charges. So in fact, both participants might agree that what happened is consensual, and the government might say, we disagree. So when you've seen that old like meme joke about one side saying I consent and the other side saying I consent, and there's Jesus standing in the middle saying I don't consent, that's a jokey meme, but that's actually what our government does. It's weird. So yeah. Somebody saying Drex and legal mindset would be hilarious in that conversation. Quite possibly. Include Rob in that, ruin his innocence. Fair enough. So, yes, I love Runkle trying to say he's a prude without saying he's a prude. I'm not a prude. It's just there's a difference between like what I'm into and what I'm aware of. And I'm aware of a whole lot more than what I'm into. And, so I've got no problem with people doing the things they want to do, right? I'm not going to be there like, hey, you got to stop that, like gross or anything like that. That's not, unless we're talking about like, there's boundaries, right? We all, yeah. But, yeah. Yeah. So that's just it, right? So, all right. Somebody says, absolutely pay to see Rob in that conversation. I will try to do that. What kind of metaphor is that? I mean, it's just pointing out that the government sometimes says, hey, just because you think that what you're doing is okay and your partner thinks that what you're doing is okay, doesn't mean that it's actually that the government is okay with it. So, somebody saying, please explain BDSM, bondage, domination, sadism, masochism. So a general catch-all category for a variety of particular sorts of kink. Is it legal to even own handcuffs? Yes, asterisk. Complicated question. So that is one we will have to, talk about later there. So, yeah. All right. Okay, this is a joke I got to share here. Hey, Runkle, doesn't the subject of BDSM tire you out? Don't know about you, but I'm whipped. Yeah, I'll raise a glass to that. So I'm going to try to wrap this up here because the reason why is it is really hot in here. It is really warm, and I've got a ring light on, and without the ring light, I look terrible. Like this is me with no ring light. It gets my webcam going. I don't know how to focus. But the ring light also throws a lot of heat because it's throwing like the light turns into heat. So I'm kind of dying here. I'm just like, and I can't turn on the air conditioning without you guys getting that air conditioning hum. So if you guys have any more questions or alternately jokes including at my expense, because some people are having some great ones. May, thank you for the super sticker here. Seeing some would say it's steamy. Now he wants to wrap things up. Kinky. Great. And Candace, thank you for the super sticker as well. I see Runkle is getting hot from explaining BDSM. Yeah. Great chat. Thank you. Take care. Thank you for the $5 there. And yeah, I will probably have to find somebody to do like a locals live stream Runkle After Dark thing because yeah, I don't think that's a YouTube conversation. It's a difficult conversation. It's one that raises a whole bunch of, tough things, but I think it might be fun to get somebody who is from the community who doesn't really know the legal aspects, and I could sort of get them to explain for the chat, because I know some of you guys are, some of you guys from your comments are way ahead of me on this, and some of you guys are going, what's this mean? So explain for the people who are like, what does this mean? What's going on? And, then I could be like, okay, this is how you say you protect yourself, and this is how that doesn't actually protect you. So, all right. And somebody says I should open a skincare line. I literally just wake up, and sometimes wash my face. That's sort of the thing there. Yep. And I will wrap this up. I see people are mentioning that Emily D. Baker is streaming, and let me just see if I can set up a redirect because Emily is awesome, and that is where I am going. All right. I don't know how to set up a redirect today. So, unofficial jerry-rigged redirect. Go check out Emily D. Baker's stream because that's where I'm headed later. So I see somebody saying, "You suck. You wake up with that glorious." It's not glorious. I mean, I've got, yeah. So are tattoos and piercings legal? They cause pain? Probably, yes. But when I see Scott is also streaming, okay, you got lots of options. All right, so catch you guys later, and thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. This was a good topic. It was an important topic to cover, and